And so I would like to introduce you to Mr. and Mrs. Mugg. Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Mugg. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Mugg, they fell deeply in love with one another. I mean, Mr. Mugg was going along one day, and clearly Mrs. Mugg is hot. And so he fell in love with them, and they just started growing together, and they were just dating, and everything was wonderful. And, you know, they were just going along in life. It was beautiful. And, you know, even if a friend came up and told Mrs. Mugg, are you sure you want him to be like your boyfriend, or you really want to marry him because he's got some things wrong with him? Mrs. Mugg would be like, oh, no way. He's like so perfect, you know? And he's got a six-pack, and he's got a big checking account, and yada, yada, yada. And I mean, you know, when we fall in love, it's blind love. You don't know diddly squat about that person, okay? And same thing for Mr. Mugg. You know, Mr. Mugg might have a buddy that comes up to him and says, you know, later on, have you seen her mom? Oh, I mean, I didn't say that. Well, guys just operate different, you know. But, you know, he's like, no way. He's got his blinders on. There's no way that could ever happen. And it doesn't matter if there even are flaws because we don't see them. We're in love, right? And so what happens is they go along and they end up getting married at the altar and all this kind of stuff. And they're going along in their marriage and everything's beautiful and great. La, 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 la. You know, and they're going along. And then all of a sudden one day she says something to him and they step back and she's like, what in the world were those blue things? You didn't even tell me you had any blue things. And she's like, well, it's what you said, and because of what you said, it just made me angry, and you know, and he's like, well, there's pink things everywhere, and they start getting in this little bit of argument, realizing, hey, there was something inside of you that I didn't really know about, and boom, it happens again and over again, and all of a sudden there's like little blue things and pink things everywhere, and they didn't even realize that the other person had those things in them. And thus, we're married. And so what happens is, sometimes the pink Mrs. Mugg, you know, she runs over, and talks to her girlfriend. You're never going to guess what happened, and I didn't even know he had those blue things in him. And Mr. Mugg, he runs over and goes to, well, I don't know who guys talk to. They look in the mirror, and they, you know, say something and figure it out, and then they come back and like, I didn't know you had those pink things. I didn't know you have those blue things, and they're going back and forth, and there's beads going everywhere. So here's the deal. What was in them from the very beginning. Because it's a condition of the heart. And it doesn't matter who you are, and it doesn't matter who you are with. Okay? It doesn't matter who you're with, who you are is eventually going to come out. Because it's a matter of the heart. And as you think about all the beads that are on the table, there's little blue beads and pink beads all over the floor. I know everyone's going to love cleaning that up later. It makes you ask the question, what in the world are these little blue and pink beads? And here's a reality check. They're feelings. The blue bead is the guy. And most guys will only own up to two feelings, frustration and anger. Those are the two feelings that guys will actually admit that we have. But guys, guess what? We're made in the image of God, just like our wife was made in the image of God, and you have a whole bank of other feelings. You just won't admit it. Because we all have feelings like jealousy, feeling lonely, impatience, anger, regret. There's all kinds of feelings. You could list tons of them. And we all have them. But one of the things that we do is we get into a relationship and the beads start flying everywhere and we blame each other for spewing beads. But the reality is we need to pick up the beads and we need to look at them and we need to say to ourselves, where in the world did this come from? And what exactly is this? And there are times where I think we need to look at the bead and we need to say, wow, this is jealousy. And the reason that I'm acting like this in the relationship has a lot to do with what I brought into this relationship, the condition of my heart. Or, wow, this is being burnt so many times and not having any trust because of my previous, the way I grew up or my life experiences, and therefore I'm bringing it into the marriage and I'm still looking through that lens, and it's affecting, but it's a condition of the heart. It's not always the behavior of the spouse. And if you really understand this concept, it will revolutionize your marriage. Because here's the other part of it. Sometimes you pick up your little bead and you look at it and you say, wow, I look at this bead and I'm feeling like I don't have any value. That is a lie of the enemy. The truth is you are valued. But when we actually look at what the bead is and what's in our heart, we can dispel the lie of the enemy and say, that's a lie from the father of lies. And I'm accepting the truth that is found in a relationship with Jesus Christ, that I am of great value. There are other times you pick up the bead and you look at it and you say, wow, this is a bead of loneliness. No, that's a lie. Because your value, your hope, your peace, your joy, your contentment, it's all found in one place. Jesus Christ. But so many times we say, well, my joy, my contentment, my peace, it's your fault.
It's your fault.
You know, and we get in this bead fight. And we go back and forth in it, realizing that there are many times that we need to stop and realize that it's me. It's the condition of my heart and where I am in my relationship with Jesus Christ that is affecting this relationship more than anything else. And if we get that, it'll revolutionize our marriage, and it brings us to this verse, Ephesians 5:21.
Ephesians 5:21 says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. The most important part of this verse is the last three words, reverence for Christ. I cannot wait for Brent to do something great in order for me to submit to him or respect him or love him. I don't have to try to look for him as an example for my behavior. I look to Christ. Christ is the one. He showed us how to submit, and so that's how we do it. This particular verse is not directed just to wives. This verse is for anybody. And so husbands, do the same thing in your marriage relationship. Love your wife and follow Christ's example of that. Give to her, love her, express your love to her. We see that Christ does that to us in hundreds of ways every day if we open our eyes. But put your spouse's interests above your own. That really is what submission means, and we both need to practice it. But if you're not submitting, if you're not loving your spouse, if you're not having a servant attitude in your marriage, we don't want you in this particular service to be like elbowing your spouse or looking at them or like, oh, I can't wait to talk to him about this. We want you to think about this for you. We want you to think about this for yourself, for your own heart. We want this to be kind of a self-examination about it. So if you are not being a servant in your marriage, don't want you to think about what your spouse does to make it so hard for you to be a servant, which could be true. But I want you to look at the condition of your heart. Are you guarding your heart? With what's coming out of your heart, is it something that reflects Christ?